It's just 11:58 p.m. on a Sunday night in 1997. You standing in your living room in your pajamas, holding a VHS tape of Space Jam that you've watched twice this weekend. The Blockbuster you rented it from closes in. You check the wall clock 7 minutes. Your parents are already in bed. And you realize, with that specific flavor of panic that only existed in the 90s, that you forgot to rewind. You jam the tape into the VCR, hit rewind, and watch the counter spin backward. 1 hour 32 minutes and 47 seconds. 1 hour 15 minutes and 22 seconds. 0 hours 58 minutes and 11 seconds. The machine hums. You're calculating. Can you make it? Do you have time to drop it in the night return slot before midnight? Will they charge you for another day? That anxiety, that very specific low-grade dread. You remember it, don't you? But here's what's strange. That feeling wasn't really about the late fee. It was about something much bigger. Something about responsibility, about time, about the gap between childhood and whatever comes next. And understanding why that moment mattered might change how you see your entire relationship with growing up. Let's set the stage for a second. In the 90s, renting a movie wasn't a click. It was a commitment. You had to physically go to a store, navigate the aisles, make a decision, one decision, maybe two if your parents were feeling generous, and then you had 48 hours to watch it before you had to bring it back. The video rental process created artificial scarcity in a way streaming can never replicate. You couldn't pause your subscription. You couldn't add it to your list. You had a ticking clock, a physical object in your home that didn't belong to you, and a social contract. Be kind, please rewind, and that contract? It was one of your first real responsibilities. Here's what's wild. Psychologists have a term for these kinds of experiences. They're called temporal landmarks, moments that your brain uses to organize and anchor your memories. And the late-night Blockbuster return wasn't just about returning a tape. It was a ritual that marked the end of weekend freedom and the beginning of school week obligation. Your brain encoded it as significant because it represented a transition point, a threshold. Think about the last time someone mentioned Blockbuster, that warm rush of recognition, right? But it's not really about the store. Your brain encoded that experience alongside hundreds of contextual details, the fluorescent lights, the carpet pattern, the plastic smell of VHS cases, the disappointment when your movie was already rented, the joy when it wasn't. That 11:58 p.m. panic? It's wrapped up with who you were, what you were afraid of, what you thought being responsible meant. So let's talk about what was really happening in that living room. You miss rewinding tapes because your brain associates that moment with a very specific developmental stage. You were old enough to be trusted with things, but young enough that forgetting still felt catastrophic. You were practicing being an adult, and the stakes felt real, even though objectively, they weren't. $1 late fee. That's it. But to you, in that moment, it felt like failure. Child development researchers have found that kids between roughly 8 and 14 are hyper-aware of rules and consequences. You're learning the physics of social contracts. You're building your internal model of how responsibility works. And the Blockbuster return was a perfect laboratory for that. Clear rules, clear consequences, a physical action required. No one could return it for you. Well, they could, but then you'd failed the test. That VHS tape in your hands was one of the first things in your life that was yours to manage, but not yours to keep. And here's where it gets deeper. When you were a kid, your brain was operating in what neuroscientists call high encoding mode. Everything was being recorded at a higher resolution because you were still learning what the world was. A random Sunday night in 1997 feels more vivid than last Sunday because your brain was paying attention to everything. The texture of the carpet under your feet, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the anxiety in your chest as the counter spun backward. Your adult brain, by contrast, is running on autopilot most of the time. It's efficient. It discards the boring parts, the repetitive parts, the parts that don't threaten or surprise you. That's why last week is already blurry, but 1997 is crystalline. And this is the uncomfortable part, you're not missing the tape. You're missing who you were when you held it. Nostalgia is a liar. A very convincing one. It airbrushes out the boredom, the loneliness, the fact that you spent most of that Sunday kind of waiting for the weekend to be over so something would happen. You remember the panic of 11:58 p.m., but you don't remember the 3 hours earlier that day, when you were just existing, killing time. The human brain has a feature called rosy retrospection. We remember the past as better than it was. We remember the peaks, the birthday parties, the snow days, the perfect summer afternoons, and we forget the valleys. The everyday sameness. The fact that you were also anxious about school, or lonely, or bored out of your mind. You remember the rewinding. You do and remember that you've already seen Space Jam 4 times and were kind of tired of it. And here's the twist. When you feel that ache for simpler times, you're not actually aching for simplicity. You're aching for stakes that felt manageable. For responsibilities that had clear boundaries. For a world where your biggest fear was a $1 late fee, not everything else. Because here's what that 11:58 p.m. moment represented. A problem you could solve. The rules were clear. The consequence was proportional. And if you succeeded, if you got that tape back in time, you won. You were responsible. You were growing up correctly. That feeling doesn't exist anymore. Not because you're broken, but because adult problems don't have clear return policies. So what do we do with this? Should you reject nostalgia? Pretend that rewinding tapes didn't matter? No, because here's the thing. That feeling of contained responsibility, of clear rules and proportional consequences, that's not childish. That's what humans need to feel oriented in the world. You don't miss the tape. You miss knowing exactly what was expected of you and having the power to meet it. The point isn't to recreate the past. You can't. Blockbuster is gone. VHS is obsolete. And you're not 11 years old standing in a dark living room in your Rugrats pajamas anymore. But you can ask, what was I getting from that experience? And the answer is a sense of agency. A sense that responsibility was learnable. That you could mess up, forget to rewind, and still fix it. That failure wasn't permanent, just inconvenient. Maybe you don't need Blockbuster back. Maybe you just need to remember that you're still that person. The one who could solve problems. The one who took the tape out of the VCR, ran outside in the dark, dropped it in the night return slot, and walked back inside feeling like they'd won something. You still have that in you, it just looks different now. So the next time you feel that ache for Sunday nights in 1997, remember, you're not mourning the tape. You're mourning a version of yourself who believed that responsibility was simple, that rules were fair, and that if you just got the thing back on time, everything would be okay. And here's the real secret. That version of you, they didn't disappear. They just grew up and realized the world is more complicated than Blockbuster made it seem. But the part of you that cared about doing the right thing, even when it was inconvenient, even when no one was watching, that part is still sitting in your living room at 11:58 p.m., watching the counter spin backward, hoping you make it in time. You did then. You can now.